It seems like recently there's been just an explosion of solo RPG little game books as well as supplemental materials. And I've collected 5 of them here to present in this video. And I am going to be doing these occasionally because there is just a lot of material that I want to show you and give you the chance to be exposed to see whether it's something you want to pick up. And there is just no time to do individual videos, at least no time to do individual videos for me on everything that I come across. This is maybe the second video that I've done. These are all, they're going to be presenting them sort of in alphabetical order, and they are all independently produced, either solo RPG or RPG supplements or little games that you can play. There's a wide range of what we've got here, and I may actually also toss in this one I realize wanted to cover as well. They are, some of them are free, some of them are for purchase, some of them I was given, the channel was given, and some of them I have bought. So there's a mixture in here of all of this, and I will just go through and show you them. I have put links to all of them down below. These are obviously physical copies, and I believe in every case they come available as digital copies as if you wish. So again, in alphabetical order, we're going to start with, this is a supplement. It is called Bell Whispers, and it's from Tower House Creative, and it is a zine that has adventure starters in it. It has D100 tables and a dungeon generator. And we will just look through briefly to see what is offered here. It's a little bit, I guess, chock-a-block in a way. It doesn't really have a particular overriding theme, but the author says it's a collection of ideas, methods, tools, tables, and tips to help you explore the depths of your imagination, create memorable adventures, monsters, characters, and NPCs. And it is going to let you work with it as you wish. It could be for a regular GM, or I think very easily and perhaps even intentionally for soloists. So you have a D12 table at the outset that will just let you turn to a random page in this book for an adventure starter. And it tells you that you need for this variety of dice and notes and graph paper, as well as your favorite RPG rule system. So it is a book that is intended to be supplemental material to something else. And then we have the 12 adventure starters here, and you can see, I'm not going to look through or show you in detail all of them, but there is a paragraph description for an adventure starter, just kind of in all over the place. So here's an example of one that says, chants cascade reverberating from the high marble galleries. The cloying perfumed incense is a textured shawl hanging over the congregation. 7 gold-draped high priests stand arms raised, drawing all eyes. Some more description. Silence cracks like a whip over the hall as the copper ring bursts into a showering swirl of red sparks. Opening like an iris, the sparks reveal a glowing figure sitting on the crystal throne. Is this truly the return? So one example of one of the adventure starters, of which, as I said, there are 12 to start the book. Next, there is a dungeon generator here, and it is suggested that you have a backstory, narrative, inspiration, character, tools, monsters, and challenges rolling on the tables that are here, with a sample adventure starter, some framing questions that you would create to give some backstory, and then the tables that are connected to the generator here, including, this is the narrative inspiration table, there is a table, D20 table of seasons, a dungeon theme table, sounds, lighting. There is a result of what happens when you travel through the dungeon, whether you find a path or a room, and then it will send you in other places to roll on other tables for the features, the doors, whether there are traps, inhabitants, the difficulty of what you find in there, and there is a strange room table. So, nothing that you haven't seen in other types of supplements if you own them, but specific to this. And for soloists and GMs, it's always nice to have additional material, and that's very much what this is. And then we have some random D100 tables that are kind of a little bit all over the place. So there is one of oddities and obstacles. For example, humanoid shapes trapped in giant amber boulders, or a long stone table heaped with fresh foods, or a recently abandoned dig site. And then we have a D100 table of hateful hallways. So a break in the tile-lined hallway reveals a polished spike, or the feeling of something lurking hangs in the air, or cuts and creases of various depths slice down the hall, or groans vibrate the hall. The floor is a loose seesaw with a central fulcrum. We have D100 collected curiosities, a square of pinked monogram silk, a pouch of pungent dried herbs, a flowing fur-lined poncho, or a lidded urn full of thick black liquid. And then we have D100 notable character features. So these would be some physical features. It looks like a missing tooth, different colored eyes, a long neck, lanky, pale, and then creature irregularities, additional limbs, cursed, bloated, levitating, telepathic. And then there is a little discussion here on how to make this what you're working with. It says a journey beyond generic. In the previous pages, you were presented with tools to make dungeons, ideas to start stories, and now here is a strategy for kind of making it unique and stand apart from something else. And there is a little essay here on how to do that and giving some simplified steps for creating your unique dungeon. And then finally, we have a so-called bonus NPC concept blender, a method to generate NPC concepts using the tables in this zine. And it explains how you can incorporate notable features, the environment, the profession, the reason for the NPC, and what they're carrying and when they're going to be encountered to give yourself a fully fleshed out NPC to put into your adventures. So that is the look at the Bell Whispers zine from Tower House Creative. Next up, we have this is a game called Beneath the Dungeon Floor. It's a lunch and crawl adventure from Hodag RPG. And I printed this off from the internet. I'll put the link down below. It is a solo game lasting about an hour for each session. You generate a party of 6 characters and you send them to delve into dungeons. It's targeted at solo, it says, but you could, I suppose, play it with like a friend if you each played 3 characters. It is pretty basic. There's a little background for the setting here. You are going to generate your character randomly. So you are going to roll a d6 for each character to determine whether they're human or a demi-human. And then within that, you will be rolling to determine what type they are, whether they're a nomad, for example, or a soldier, or they could be a treasure hunter or a mage of some sort. The mechanic that the game runs on is quite simple. There's a target number that you are meant to meet or exceed to do combat and be successful in combat. And there's a very basic dungeon generator here to create doors and passages and determine if there are traps or features in the room itself. And then there is a way of categorizing the monsters by difficulty. So there's easy, medium, and hard monsters that you will roll to see if it's in the room, and then within that you have the D6 listing of, for example, these are the easy monsters, and they are described with their stats and a narrative description, as well as each one has a little treasure table for what they give you. Now, in playing this game, you have to kind of make up what the treasures will actually do for you, because this is the extent of the entire rule set. So you don't have a list that explains like what you can do with your dry leather scraps or your sack of chicken bones, for example. But there's enough here that it is thematic, so that the skeletons, you could get a rusty shield from them and figure out how to use that, perhaps maybe give yourself some benefit for that. There's a page here devoted to giving you some sample names and personalities. Again, no direct link to the mechanics that are given for the game, but it's included here as part of what is existing. And then there are some world flavor here. You could see some factions, names, armies, and militias. It becomes more like a framework for you to build into it. So the content here is pretty limited, but there's enough here that you could build into it. Like, for example, when I was playing it, I decided that if I rolled the various size rooms, I indicated how many types of features they would have. Again, the features, as with many of these things here, they don't really have a built-in impact, like if there are ropes, baskets, or tools. But as you're playing it, you could decide that you might be able to make an attempt to hide behind it or something like that. So it's a framework for a game, and it is called a lunch and crawl adventure. So imagine that it is meant to be played fairly quickly. That is a look at Beneath the Dungeon Floor. Next up, we have a much more extensive game, Derelict Delvers, from this designer. And the back, well, we'll look actually just inside. It's perhaps a little bit easier to see. Here are the credits for the game and what it is based on. It is a thrilling, action-packed sci-fi role-playing game that immerses you in a struggle for survival and profit. The game takes place in a galaxy overrun by monstrous alien creatures who have destroyed humanity's peaceful exploration and diplomatic efforts. You take on the role of elite space troopers, scientists, and engineers who must explore derelict spaceships and space stations in order to scavenge for supplies, salvage for weapons and valuable resources, and ultimately hunt down the monsters that threaten the very existence of mankind. It is a journey of exploration, discovery, and opportunity. What's great about this game is it says it can be played 1 to 6, and it is there are a lot of prompts in the game. There's a lot of tables in the back of the book with prompts, and you can create the narrative for what is going on. For example, the monster has a form and a tactic. There's a mood, there's an intent and a subject, or nature and topic. So if you're familiar with like Spark tables that are making their way into many solo RPGs now, this book has a ton of them. And as you go through what is in effect a dungeon crawl, a sci-fi dungeon crawl, you are using these tables to help you create the story of what's going on with your character. And this is a full rule set here. We're not going to get into the rules directly, but I will show you enough to explain that you are, even with creating your character, you're given these prompts, these types of concepts. So it says the first thing you need to create is to come up with a concept, a short descriptive sentence that captures the occupation or role of your character. You are given some examples here of what that might be. And there are basic abilities of frame, focus, and flair. So frame is like a physical prowess. focus is your mind, your reasoning, and flair is the ability to use the powers that you have. And these are represented by assigning a D8, a D10, and a D12 for each of those. The powers that you have, again, it is the power tags, they're called, to have tables that will give you a power name that to interpret that and then decide what that power actually means. And then there are some examples given here that you could also pick up. So quantum duplication, create a temporary duplicate of the user, allowing them to confuse and distract enemies. But these are coming from the tables that are in the back. So you are, again, from the outset, forming the concepts in a narrative manner. There is something here that is like slightly confusing if you're playing solo, which is this concept of the meta role, that it's essentially almost like a GM concept that is when there are decisions that need to be made that aren't directly tied to your character. And you are suggested that you come up with the concept for this and what the meta role is. So the cartographer would be describing the rooms, or the storyteller is describing the behaviors and visuals and the mood of things. Here is the sample character sheet where you have both the space for the meta roles as well as your individual character here. Then there's a section on how the dice work and how the mechanics of the game actually work, and what you rolling the dice, whether you are ending up with something that is a botch or becomes a threat, or you get a way to advance on this. And what's useful about this is that there's descriptions of what happens when you are rolling below the target number, equal to, above it, and how that will advance the narrative in a certain way. And this is a system here that you choose what happens so that there isn't just the success or failure, but it is what that is actually going to mean for you. And it explains for every type of check in the game what the narrative impact would be of the various success or fail for danger or loot or a hit in combat, for example, or a wound. There's a table here for wounds that will tell you a little bit more what happens with a wound. Retreat, rest, fixing, to try to fix something. In terms of how do you actually play the game, you repeat this following loop in phases. And you can see that you're going to begin by rolling up the derelict tags that refer to the tables that we'll look at in the back of the book here. So the derelicts here, to determine basically what the dungeon is that you are crawling through. And you can see that they have things like the major role of something could be a graveyard or archaeology or cryogenetics. And then you can see sites in here like drifting debris, crystalline structures, cosmic rays, or particle emissions. And this is going to be paired then with the mood tags that will help you figure out what is the kind of feeling of this place and the rooms that you're in. And the mood tags we saw here, they have their intent, the subject, so you could roll this up to even create the reason for something, like the intent is overcome peace, or reveal nature, or distract memory, for example. And then you will go through the rooms to sketch the room, divide it into different zones, do exploration, have some encounters with what might be in there. The encounters or the dangers could be monsters or hazards. And again, creating these out of the spark tables that are in the back, and then taking your actions, moving, fighting, things of that nature. It's an interesting mix of using tables to give you prompts that will create a narrative, down to the point of what type of creature you are going to be encountering. And then at the back of the book, like pretty substantially here at the the last third of this book are these spark tags. And I will say that even if you don't play with the rules of this game or for this type of dungeon crawl, these are really useful. So we already looked at the derelict major role here table and the sights and readings within that, alien markings, luminescent fluid poles, the types of rooms you may encounter, a library and archives, luxury quarters, the docking bay. So you can flesh these out as much as possible. There's room features here, rusted metal, slimy ooze, but it's going to be up to you to put it together into a story. There's a table for room decorations. Oh, there's some layouts that you can roll up for the rooms if you wish. Hazards like perilous pits, radiation fields, smoke-filled room, action hazards, or corrode, sporadic, gradual, stab, strangle, suffocate. And then monsters have a form and a tactic, the undead that's going to pursue you, or cubes that will flank you. For example, you could have monster traits it might have an energy shield or poisonous thorns or spinal barbs. It could have a weapon, a sonic blast or telekinesis. Again, up to you to figure out how that would fit narratively into your story. So there is in this a pretty strong component of your own narrative lift to put it all together into a story. We have various powers like a fearful aura, shadow step, power aspects of powers, precision, AI assisted, ignited, and in effect, stabilize, compress, neutralize, decode. We looked at this mood table, the intent of something to restore the subject, death, or to summon fear. The nature of something, it might be collapsed. The topic or what it's about, it could be debris or salvage or a symbol or structure or liquid. We have a table for the manner of something, mysteriously, quietly, slowly, freely. The quality of something, abnormal, old, faded, or warm. Sounds, blaring, music, scratching, screeching, a growl, ticking. Or smells, acidic, choking, musky, rotten, or floral. And then finally, the character sheet. So this game is an example of something I have talked about in other videos where it is a kind of a not quite completely solo in the sense of it could be played with somebody actually leading you or a group of people through it. But because it has these heavily relies on the spark tables, that it is a very supported solo experience if you want to take those spark tables and use them as the basis for creating a narrative for your derelict delvers in this sci-fi dungeon crawl. All right, next up is Dungeon Plumbers. I have shown this briefly before. This is designed for use with old school essentials. It's by Wayne Robert. It is described as a diesel punk fantasy zine supplement. So the author says it's a subgenre of a subgenre applied to a niche medium, but it's a niche I've not found tackled much elsewhere. And there's a whole list of recommended media or support for or things to read to get you into the feeling of this type of world, which is a fantasy setting based on sewer delving adventurers who harness the strange powers of subterranean crystal shards and face all manner of fantastical threats while getting tripped up on magic mushrooms. And I apologize if it's hard to see this in the video. The font in this book, in this zine, is pretty small, and part of it is really light. So just be prepared for that. The digital version may be more reader friendly in that regard. There's a ton of stuff in here. It begins with a campaign idea generator, a D20 table to generate a diesel punk campaign idea, complete with a plot motivations table, plot complications, the concept of where the magical power is coming from, alien tech or a miniature universe, as well as a focus of the adventure here, limited resources or a tomb, a new fuel source. This is the Old School Essentials is not a solo system, but I've done a video on it, and I put the link to that up here to show how it can be very solo friendly. But this is a supplement designed for that. So not specifically solo, but definitely soloable. There's an enemy idea generator, unusual enemy traits. They're superpowered, or they are glowing or gnarly, or just plain mutant. Some names here. We have the characters for Dungeon Plumbers, which we'll get to in a minute. There is a new weird value here, which is essentially the way magic comes into this world, fungal communication, weird magic, and how the magic is transmuted through these weird stones. So that is the way that magic is in this world. There are weapons specific to this setting and adventuring gear like a detonator, a scope, an electric torch that work in this diesel punk setting. OSC, the rule set, is more traditional fantasy setting, which this is not. It's related, but it is not that. And you have your list of weapons here and what it does, as well as getting to the new classes. These are the unique and strange roles of the subterranean delvers in Dungeon Plumber campaign setting. And there is, for each one, there's a double-page spread with an illustration. There are a description of them. So, for example, the dredgers are aquatic explorers of vast underground water networks. They excel at underwater combat, finding and amassing useful junk, and facing the many dangers lurking in the waters of the dark below. You get your stats up here, and then your specific benefits at various levels. So by the time this dredger gets to the 7th level, they're inured to muck, for example. There is an electro-wright who is basically a mechanic and a tinkerer, like a kind of gnome-ish character in this setting. So they could absorb electricity, and they can do things like expend their own electricity to do things, and they can create experimental gadgets that work in this world. There's a gut rot gourmand. Most adventurers crave wealth or glory, but the gut rat gourmand seeks only to dine on the most unusual and often most disgusting cuisines they can find or invent. There's a gutter snipe. Stealthy and snarky wheeler dealers and masters of ranged combat, gutter snipes take advantage of the fact that they are often underestimated. They get various benefits like being a loner or a backstabber or a sniper. There's a juggernaut. Imposing and relentless brutes who rely on sheer power to hold position or batter through barriers and enemy ranks. So you can kind of see how these might align to things like a warrior or a barbarian or maybe a rogue, but within this world. There's a myco-mage, combining arcane spellcasting with mind-expanding psychedelic mushrooms and an affinity for weird stones. Myco-mages are unusual mages, and a description of their spells and how they have affinity to the weird stones and what that actually means. Smoothing spores once per day, they can create a magical concoction of fungi or other ingredients to create a healing salve, for example. And then there's a tunnel rat. Quintessential dungeon plumbers combining uncanny skill, luck, and awareness. And an undermucker, trudging through the sludgiest, foulest reaches of the darkest subterranean realms. Undermuckers pick up diverse skills to survive such hellish places. They have some alchemy, as well as the ability to, they're experts in navigation for sewers, dungeons, and other subterranean structures. And finally, I think this is finally the Verminator. They are beast wranglers, both hunt and tame the many creatures of the underworld. The weird stones are described here in terms of what they are, how they work with the magic in this world, and then you have the various descriptions with the kinds of spells that they will provide. And some of them, like curing light wounds, for example, a sleep spell are very familiar from fantasy. And then there are others that are more specific to this dungeon type of world. There is a listing here of monsters, but I'll show you that in the front of the book, there are very useful encounter tables by level of both the monsters that are in this book, as well as the relevant monsters that come from the Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy Referees Tome. So what this book does is it pulls out of the OSE Advanced Fantasy book ones that can translate into this type of world, and then it also provides you with some new ones. So if you don't have that, I don't actually have the advanced fantasy. I have just the regular book. So not all of these monsters are in my book. You could still use this supplement, but you will be missing some of them. And what's particularly useful here is the fact that for solo play, obviously you can just roll on this and get the encounters already there for you in a random kind of way. And as I said, some of them come from here and some of them come from the other book. Each monster that is in here has a narrative description, like this subterranean fly trap that's a massive tangle of barbed vines whose many spiny maws snap at anything moving. It's a carnivorous plant and ambush predator that often lurks in unsuspecting crevices, pipes, shafts, and tunnels. And there's a whole lot of things that these things can do, and a whole lot of ways that you can interact with each of these enemies. So it would require, if you're playing on your own, well, there are some solo rules and enemy combat AI here. So we'll get to that in a minute. We'll look, there's an Inferno Flower, a Kappa Tyrant. These are ogre-sized Kappas, titanic brutes of the worst temperament. And myconoids, they are various traits that can be assigned to traditional monsters to make them fit in here. And here you can see the art there. There's a Fungabat, small bat-winged mushroom-like predator, has a gaping maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. A Muctopod, enormous white squid-like creature, is actually a deadly aquatic fungal predator. A Sporling, a Poos, a roiling, steaming brown slime mold creeps across the floor with countless reaching tendrils. Its stench turns the stomachs of the hardest warriors. Again, each of these, the Shambling Clog, the Sporling, has various things it can do. So super thematic. And even if you only worked with the enemies specifically from this zine supplement, it would be a lot. And then at the end here, we have a table of sewer hazards that you can roll on as you are going through your dungeon that you create. A floor collapse could happen, a cursed object, lava flow, a thieves' den. And there is provided here an adventure, a dungeon here that is meant not for the soloist, but you could find ways to randomize this and pull these things into your own gameplay if you wanted to do that. And then at the end, and here's the character sheet, pretty cool. I like the little stairs down with the gear. The solo rules here are in the back cover of the book, and it's telling you that you use the OSE Advanced Fantasy rules as a baseline, and it's telling you which rules to pick up and which rules not to use. And the combat procedure is slightly different. It says your enemies do not roll to attack. You roll to defend against the attack, and it tells you what the rule is using the same combat sequence from the OSE. And then it will give you the different ways to cast a spell and how to do a melee attack. It directs you toward the encounter tables and pointing out that this book's inside cover has a revised encounter table which focuses on the sewer adventures. Which focuses on, sewer adventures. And then the enemy combat AI is a little chart here. So can you see the enemy? Yes or no. Does the enemy have ranged attack? And then it will direct you what to do. No, it will direct you what to do, and go back. And it says that if an enemy has a special attack, spell, special ability, etc., you can randomly determine what it uses or use common sense for that. And as I said, there are basically all of them have various types of special attacks. So what you could do was, if there were like 5 or 6 of them, you could just assign a number, and it's number 3. So it's going to, this sporling initially is going to send out a spore cloud if you rolled that way, for example. And I think that the narrative basis of the monsters here is super helpful in creating the immersion into this world of dungeon plumbers. So it describes itself, this is a genre zine, tools for adding dieselpunk elements to your old school fantasy role-playing. It's a setting, a toolbox, over a dozen new monsters, 2 short adventures, and the compatibility, as mentioned, to the OSE Advanced Fantasy or similar RPG rules system. That's a look into Dungeon Plumbers. Next up, we have a game, a solo pit crawl, about searching for an ancient beast. This is a kind of lighthearted game from ADA Press or ADA Press. And here are the credits for that. This is The Taming of the Sluggeraf. Sluggeraf. Not sure how to pronounce that, but you can get a sense as we look again at the credits for this, what you are meant to do here. This is, it says, your quest. Greatness starts from the smallest of steps. This is you. You're a giblet, a small and inoffensive fantasy background monster living happily with your tribe in the trees on the Golden Plains. But for your people to truly prosper in this gold-smeared world, you need to transport, you need help, you need the ancient beast of your tribe's past. You need a Sluggeraf. The only place you can find these is in the pit, which is a dark, underground world where the gold has run out. This is a solo pit crawl designed for short, silly games that usually end with a splatted giblet or giblet. You're instructed to create a number of these because they're basically going to die, and you will start with various item slots, and these are essentially your health, because when you fail a test, you're going to lose an item or slot of your choice, and at a moment that you have nothing left there, you will be gone yourself. And you will do some exploration and very basic combat. There's a difficulty score that you are going to attempt to match or beat to defeat the monster. I'm not going to show you too much of it because the content is limited, and I don't want to sort of give it all away, but you are rolling in to explore a new area. You're going to roll on the biome table. It's a D6 table to see where you are. There are settlements with specific encounters, and then there are various beasts and things that you can encounter in these tables with some very light stats, as well as what the loot is that they will be releasing to you. And one of the cool things about the loot is that there's one loot table, but you're rolling different dice to see how much access you have to the loot table. So this bigger beast gives you a d20 to roll on the d20 table, whereas this small skittering fuchsia just gives you a d8 to roll. So here is the loot table, and you have, when you find this thing, you need to tame it. And it is a part giant slug, part giraffe. This kind and indestructible creature can be used as transport for climbing trees, and its slime is used for medicine, magic, and chemistry. So you are attempting to tame this thing, to feed it, and to basically get it to trust you so it will return you to the surface. And here is a sample character sheet, as well as these are some loots that you could encounter. And I suppose, this is the back of the book. I suppose you could cut these out and make these cards. They're all have the same back if you wanted to attain loot that way. So this is as a kind of lightheaded, it might be a one and done sort of gameplay, something you take on with you on vacation to play. The Taming of the Sluggeraf. And finally, we're going to take a quick look at The Woods of Despair. This is a solo adventure for Fallen, and Fallen is copyright Perplexing Ruins 2021. This is presented by Joy Peddler Games. I have done one video, at least maybe two, on Fallen. I'm going to put the link to at least one of the videos right here. Fallen is not a solo system, but it has solo support, and I love it. This Woods of Despair is a sort of combination. I want to say it's almost like, well, it's described as an introductory solo module for Fallen. It's almost a little bit like a choose your own adventure-ish kind of thing. I'm not going to show you too much of it because this is definitely like a one and done kind of thing. It says you use this module to gain experience, learn the game, and get your PC ready for their travels. This adventure focuses on the exploration skill. You're starting out by creating a PC using rules from the core game, and then you're going to explore this town. And there is a very basic oracle, yes/no oracle given here, and it explains that your character is entering the town on foot. The afternoon air has a chill. The vast forests surrounding the town are beginning to change as fall nears. There are buildings of interest that you can roll up, and then once you kind of get going, you read by the paragraph as you interact with the people in the town, and then you are directed to use the prompts and narratives as a springboard. Not all the details are spelled out. Descriptions are terse. Use your skills and imagination to add flavor, intrigue, and complications. If you find yourself stuck, use the rule of fun to do what is most fun. While there is a main quest, you may be inclined to pursue other leads. And it says this is a solo game. Reading too far ahead spoils some of the surprises. So I'm not going to read too far ahead to spoil this for you, but I will say that in bold, it says here, while the core rules use a 10 plus as a success for skill checks and combat, you can use this scale here to moderate the difficulty during solo play. And I think this type of scale is something that's always important to bring into solo play because it will explain more than just having a success, but having a success, a complication, or a miss, or something really good happening, or something bad. So again, not going to really show you the rest of it. Suffice it to say, there's a bunch of, it's thin, but there's a lot of, it's densely packed with content here, and it is a solo adventure for Fallen. So I hope you enjoyed this look inside 6 little games, supplements for solo RPG play, solo support, and let me know in the comments if you like this type of showcase video and if you find this format useful for getting a look inside some things. I would like to know that. And if you find it's not useful, I'd like to know that too. Thanks again for watching.